No, 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 no. Why is it doing that? Oh, shh. Well, hi there guys, and welcome back to the Induction Noise channel. Once again today, we're going to be working on my daily driver, which has become kind of more like a project car than a daily driver, but anyway, I won't go into that. And anyone who's driving an older car will tell you one of the problems that we all face is the problem of clouding headlights. So, in the case of my Jag, a couple of months ago, I actually sanded and polished the lenses on the headlights, and they look beautiful for a couple of months. And then because the plastics are already old, they're already brittle, they're not big fans of UV rays. So as the sun bakes on them, as you get driving in rain and different weather conditions and sitting in taxi fumes for half of its life, you end up with the headlights looking exactly the same as they did before. So today, I'm going to be tackling this problem again. I'm going to be sanding them down, going to be polishing them. I'm going to show you how to do that. But then I'm going to do something a little bit extra to see if I can stop it from happening again. Now guys, I feel like I must apologize because my car is always filthy. But I've got a horrible commute. This thing has basically become a shop truck, and essentially I just don't have the time to always wash my car every weekend. So with the weather we've been having, it's just not been possible. But anyway, back to the headlights. As you can see, the headlights are quite hazy. Considering that I actually did these a couple of months ago, it's terrible just to see what kind of state they're actually in. And because they've gone sort of white and hazy, it's actually amazing how much light they stop. Because when you're driving in the dark now, it's actually quite difficult to see where the hell you're going, which obviously isn't ideal. So the first step in this whole process is to basically clean the lens first. Because if you clean the lenses, there's less chance of you actually causing more damage, because obviously as you're sanding the surface, any bits of dirt or iron contamination that sits on the lens gets swirled around on the surface and it causes scratches, which you then have to sand deeper to get rid of. So first step, just clean the headlights, and for that I'm going to be using an iron decontamination spray, which is kind of a wheel cleaner. It's that stuff that turns purple on contact with iron oxides, and it should help me clean the headlights properly so that we can carry on with the rest of the process. First thing I'm going to do is just spray some soapy water onto the headlights, because the iron oxide remover wheel spray, and the one I use is this one called Knockout, which I get from Detailer's Emporium, by the way. Very cool service online. Not sponsored in any way. Anyway, so you just basically spray this on, normally onto your wheels, and any iron contaminant, iron oxide that's on the surface here will actually turn into a little purple speck and sort of bleed out. So this is typically what they call a bleeding wheel cleaner, and generally speaking that process takes a couple of minutes, and you can actually just see some purple spots appearing there. Now it's worth mentioning at this point that this stuff does smell foul. I used to use a different one, a different iron spray, iron remover, from, I think it's 3G Pro. It's quite a lot more expensive. Does kind of the same job, but it smelled really nice, whereas this stuff has just got this horrible chemical smell to it. There's not a lot of iron on the headlights themselves, so I think I'm ready to just give them a little scrub with a sponge, and then we'll be ready for step 2. I'm going to spray some soapy water on the sponge itself and just give them a good scrub. Obviously this stuff is a pretty nasty chemical, so we don't want to leave it on there unnecessarily. We're going to rinse it all off just using the soapy water spray, and then we'll dry everything up. There we go. Now let's dry it off. Right guys, now eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed that my scrubbing with the scrubbing sponge has actually made the surface a little bit hazier than it was before. But that's perfectly fine because we're actually going to wet and dry sand it anyway, so it's going to become even more hazy. Whenever you're wet and dry sanding anything on your car, I always feel it's important to mask everything off, because the last thing I want to do is actually start sanding off the actual paint on the bumper, which is also why I've opened the bonnet on this, so that I don't have to mask everything up on top. Right guys, well as you can see, I have now masked up the affected area, and the next step is going to be to wet sand it. So I'm going to start with a 1000 grit wet and dry paper. I like to keep things very wet with some soapy water, and then I'll switch to a 1200 grit just to get the finest little scratches and marks off, and then we start polishing. Well, as you can see, after the first round of sanding, the lights almost appear white. And although that looks terrible, it is actually kind of the finish that we're going for. You want the lights to look uniformly hazed over. So you can see up here I've still got a little area that seems to be a little bit glossy, so I'm going to have to go over that. And then also over here I've got a little bit of a line there, and over here on the edge that I still need to catch. But I'll basically do an entire pass over these headlights again with the 1000 grit sandpaper. Right guys, well as you can hopefully see, we now have a much more uniform looking finish on here. It's very hazed over, but it is white and it doesn't have any lines or marks in it, which is kind of the finish that we're going for. By the way, if anyone knows where I can buy half decent masking tape, please let me know, because this stuff is useless. It just doesn't stick the second it gets even slightly damp, so I don't know how you're supposed to paint with this stuff, because it's just going to come off as soon as it's wet. But anyway, I'm going to remask this all up again, and then I'm going to hit it with the 1200 grit and basically do the same thing. For the sanding stage, I generally like to spray every couple of seconds just to keep everything nice and wet. If I feel any kind of grittiness or texture in the paper, like there's something between the paper and the light, I stop immediately, spray the paper, spray the light again to make sure that if there's any particles or stuff between the two surfaces, that they don't get smushed around, because then you'll get really horrible swirl marks in there, and you really don't want that because it's a pain to remove. So yeah, I would start off going in one direction, then I'll generally change 90 degrees and go the other direction back and forth. And then sometimes, like in this case, I'll also do at 45-degree angles. I try to avoid circles if I can, because if you do circles, it does give you a more uniform finish if it works. If it doesn't, and you have something on the paper that's causing a scratch mark, you'll get horrible circular swirl marks all over the light, which is, as I said, absolute pain to get rid of. So let me remask all of this stuff up and sand it again exactly the same way, but with the finer 1200 grit wet and dry paper. So when I'm masking up complex curves like this, I like to tear off small pieces of tape and stick them little bits at a time. If you run too long a section of tape, you end up with a piece of tape that just doesn't want to conform to the curve anymore, and it's very difficult to make it fold over and stick to the surface. So smaller pieces takes a little bit longer, but at least you know that you are going to cover what you want covered. Now, whilst we're on the subject of wet and dry paper, here's another little tip for you guys that I picked up from a paint shop in Strand. How true it is, I don't know, but I've been doing it ever since, and it hasn't seemed to had any adverse effects. But apparently you should never cut your sandpaper. You should always tear it rather than cutting, because cutting can cause sharp edges or sticky outy bits on the edges, which in turn will cause swirl marks on your job. So tear your paper into a suitable size, spray it with some soapy water, get it nice and wet, and then ignore the scooter beeping at the neighbors and simply spray down your job so that it's also nice and wet. Get sanding. As I said, I like to start going back and forth in one direction and using very little pressure, just letting the sharpness of the grit on the sandpaper actually do its job rather than trying to force it. Back and forth, all the way up and down, all over the surface. Try to get into these edges as much as you can. I know they can be a little bit difficult, but it's even more difficult to get to them with the polisher, so don't worry about it right now. And yeah, just go over the whole surface with the wet and dry paper. Give it a spray every once in a while if it starts looking like it's getting a bit dry. And then once you've gone over in one direction, you can change 90 degrees and just keep sanding up and down all the way across. This gives you a really nice uniform haziness, because once you start polishing it, anything that isn't uniform is not going to polish uniformly, and you'll end up with either scratches, you know, really fine micro scratches, or dull spots on the headlight, which you obviously don't want. Look at this useless masking tape. I hate this. I should be able to do this without the tape moving. Trying to apply pressure. Look at that. How useless is that tape? Fuck me. Because everything in this country is made in China, and it's shit. Okay, let's dry it off and see what it actually looks like. Now at this point, pulling the masking tape off, probably not the end of the world, because with the polishing stage, it's not really the end of the world if you touch the paint, because the paint needs to be polished anyway. It needs to be glossy. So let's just dry these lights off and see what the final finish looks like. Well, I say final finish, but it's the final finish after sanding. And yeah, I'm quite happy with that. I mean, they seem to be pretty much white over. I don't see any very obvious lines or scratches in them. Well, there you go, guys. After a second pass with the 1200 grit sandpaper, the surface is a lot smoother. There's no more fine lines in there, no scratch marks, no swirl marks. It's just uniformly white hazed over. The next step is obviously going to be to polish this, and for that you're going to need a power tool. You could do this by hand, but you're going to end up with arms like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and not Arnold Schwarzenegger the Governator. I'm talking Terminator days when he was still very much buff. So I'm going to use not my polisher because the polishing disc is actually too big for this job. I've got some small pads that attach to my cordless drill. I'm going to use those and a really nice polishing compound to polish these up and make them shiny again. Right guys, well this is the cutting compound that I use generally for polishing scratches and obviously headlights as well. It's by a company called Presta and it's called a Strata Ultra Cutting Creme. Very fancy. It's aggressive enough to get rid of scratches and swirl marks on your paint, or in this case headlights, but it's also the abrasive particles in this is also fine enough to actually give you a finished polish, so you don't have to go over this with another stage if you don't want to. You can actually get a really good finish just using this. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And with the Presta, as with any polishing compound, very important to shake the tube, because you know a lot of people don't realize, but the active component in a polish like this is actually an abrasive. It's not just a cleaning thing, it's not just a shining thing. You got to shake it up to make sure that those abrasive particles are obviously mixed into the solution properly. Once you've done that, I apply a very small amount to my little polishing pad on my trusty DeWalt, and we're going to hit the lights with it. A couple of small spots of the compound. And let's get buffing. So I don't know if you can see that on the camera very well, but that's literally all I'm putting on, just two little spots. Now when polishing, I like to start off on a fairly slow speed, low pressure all the way through. You don't push too hard with this stuff, and just work it into the surface and then slowly increase the drill speed until you start seeing the actual compound sort of almost disappear. So I'm going to dab the compound all over the light first, then start off on a very slow speed, and then increase my speed and decrease the pressure as we go. Kind of difficult to control my speed with this drill. The trigger's quite sensitive, and it's difficult also to get into all the little nooks and crannies, but obviously I don't want to miss any parts and leave them hazy. I want the whole thing to be shiny and polished. So it's going to take a couple of minutes, but we'll work it in. Work basically from one side to the other. Make sure you cover everything. It's easier to control the drill if you just use one side of it, you know, lift one side slightly so that it's constantly pulling in one direction. If you use it flat, it tends to want to dance around a little bit like that, which is difficult to control, and you can end up with it bouncing around on you like that. So using one edge, much easier to keep it under control. Getting into all these hard to reach places, not the easiest. The compound's getting very thin now, and I'm going much faster, much less pressure on the drill, and you can already see the shine coming back onto the headlight there. I'm going to stop there and grab a clean microfiber to just buff that off. Well guys, hopefully you can see a clear difference. This is what the headlight looks like before polishing, and then just a few moments later it's clear, it's shiny, you can see what's going on in there. No more lines, no more haze. In fact, that looks like a brand new headlight just about. So I did 3 passes with the polisher, and it went from that to that. So I think I'm going to do one more pass with a finishing polish and a different compound. But before I do that, I'm going to get this one to the same state as that one. Right guys, well hopefully you can see a vast improvement there. So to give you a sort of feel of a before and after, these are the 2 that I've polished. I've not yet done the final finishing polish with a finer compound on them, but they look pretty damn good. And just a reminder, this is what they used to look like. So this is the other side that I haven't touched yet. So that's what we started with, and this is what they look like now. So next step, just a slightly finer finishing polish, and I'm also going to be using a different finishing pad. So I have these little, sorry, I just want to grab one, little waffle pads. They're a little bit softer, and obviously because they've got the waffle finish, they should in theory give me a finer finish. So let's run one of those over and see what it looks like. Okay, for those who are interested, the finishing polish I'm going to be using is cheap and cheerful Shield Mirror Plate Liquid Car Polish. Available from any builder's warehouse or possibly even Checkers or wherever. Shield is pretty much available everywhere. It's cheap, but it works. Now guys, I have to be honest, I'm actually kind of surprised at how well these have turned out. I mean, these genuinely look and feel like brand new headlights. They're shiny, I can see through them, you can clearly see the lenses inside of the actual bulbs in there. It's genuinely been transformed. So the problem is that I basically did this about 6 months ago, and they ended up looking the same again. So what am I going to do differently this time? Well, I have a little secret weapon. You see, I reckon that if I spray the headlights with a UV resistant clear coat, maybe I can seal this finish in and I won't have to do this again in a couple of months. So I've bought a can of this Glue Devil ultra high gloss clear lacquer, and I'm going to spray it on there, and see what it looks like. Obviously, to spray, I'm going to have to mask up the entire area so I don't spray the rest of my car. But we're going to spray it and see what the results are. Right guys, well as you can see, I have masked off the area using some unbranded and completely unsponsored masking paper, which only vaguely resembles a Checkers 6060 packet. I'm now just finished following the instructions on the can, which basically says to shake the can until your arm bleeds, and I'm now going to spray the lights. Now, the way I like to do this, especially because this is not a keyed surface, is I give it the absolute lightest dusting of paint that I possibly can, and then I leave that to dry for a few seconds and repeat, basically applying as many as 5 or 6 really thin coats over the headlights. And yeah, I've never used this stuff before, so let's see what it looks like. A final shake of the tin, and here we go. Just test the nozzle there. Good spray pattern, and here we go. That's it. Now we leave it to dry. Rinse and repeat. Yes, the first coat is going to have a slightly rough, hazy finish, and you kind of want that because the paint sticks better to that finish. But essentially what this first coat does is it provides the surface for the second coat. So the second coat can be very slightly thicker, not much. I like to spray as thin as I can, and eventually it's going to even out over the surface, giving you that glossy finish that you want. So don't be alarmed if you do one coat like I just did, very, very lightly, and it looks kind of sandblasted. It's supposed to. So another quick shake of the can, and then we hit it again. I will say this, the spray nozzle on the Glue Devil can is actually quite nice. It's got a very even spray pattern, but this stuff stinks. It's got a horrible smell to it. Suppose that's not the most important factor about paint, but there you go. Right, now another 10 or 15 minutes to let it dry and we'll hit it again. Right guys, now I genuinely don't know how clearly you can see this on camera, but the headlights are looking basically brand new. Up close you can see a little bit of orange peel in the clear coat, which is fine because I don't think it's going to really affect it too much. And if I really wanted to, once this is properly dried and cured, I can just flat sand it and polish it again, and the clear coat will be basically invisible to the naked eye, which is great because it's going to protect the whole thing and stop it from clouding over again, we hope. No, why is it doing that? Oh, I did have a minor panic attack at one stage because when I put on the third coat, for some reason, I don't know why, it went white. And I don't mean like milky or slightly opaque. I'm talking it was white. It was as if I'd painted these things matte white. And I'm not quite sure why that happened on the third coat. But give it a little bit of time to dry, a little bit of time to flow, and a little bit of help from a hairdryer with some heat, and they cleared right up. So I don't know if maybe I just didn't wait long enough between coats or what exactly the story was, but I did genuinely panic when they went white, because if I had to sand all of that off again and redo all of my work, I'd have been very upset. Now, I am not going to bore you by making you watch me do the other side, because it's going to be exactly the same as this side, but I'm going to get started on the other side, and I will join you at the end to show you the finished results. Well guys, I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but that looks like a brand new headlight. I mean, it is genuinely transformed compared to what it looked like before. This is just, yeah, it's awesome. I can, for the first time, actually see into them and see the bulbs inside the headlights, which I wasn't able to do before. So presumably, driving at night now is going to be a very different experience. But yeah, it's taken me a couple of hours. I'm not going to lie, it has been kind of time consuming. The sanding takes quite a while, polishing takes quite a while, and then waiting between coats of the clear coat for it to clear and dry takes a while. So it's not a quick fix, but hopefully this now stays like this and I don't have to do it again in 6 months' time. But the difference is massive. I mean, from close up you can see a couple of small inclusions and maybe specks of dust and stuff that's sticking in the clear coat on this headlight. But other than that, as soon as you're sort of 3 or 4 foot away, they just look like brand new headlights, which is, I mean, it's remarkable. I'm speechless. I mean, it genuinely looks very different. But you may notice the Jaggon has a leaper on the hood. Now, I have been told that the golden leaper was a special edition that Jaguar did for some weird and wonderful reason, and that it was quite special that my car had one. I've never liked it. I much prefer one in chrome. So originally my plan was to get some chrome spray paint and just paint it. But since the golden leaper has become somewhat of a team mascot, I decided to lean into it. And when I was picking up the clear coat for this headlight job, I found this. So perhaps a future video, maybe a short video, just to do a reveal. But at some point or another, I'm going to be spray painting the leaper bright, shiny gold, courtesy of this stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope it helps you fix the headlights on your car if it's needed. And don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. We'll catch you in the next one.